Did you know that something silent but extremely dangerous is happening around you? The world is living a true spiritual war, where the truth is being challenged, and the voices that proclaim it are being silenced one by one. You may never have noticed, but there is a specific target at the center of this conflict, a message that bothers both religious authorities and political systems. This message comes from a group of people who maintain simple but revolutionary faith, based on principles that cannot be ignored, broken, or distorted. Have you ever wondered why the Seventh-day Adventist message is so threatening to the world? Why is so much pressure on this church and its doctrines? It is not just a matter of a day of worship or a religious interpretation. It is much deeper than that. It is a direct confrontation with the systems that govern our daily lives, a challenge to the world power system, which is doing everything to your reach to prevent this message from reaching more people's ears. And here is the point that many are not realizing. This message is not about a religion. This is not a theological dispute or a question between different beliefs. What is at stake is freedom. The freedom to worship as you want, to choose to submit to God's power or surrender to human power. And, more importantly, what is being attacked now is the biblical truth that defines the future of billions of people. Now imagine a future where true worship becomes illegal, where your faith needs to conform to the standards of the world, where the sacred day is decided by a human decree and not by the Creator. Looks like a distant scenario. Maybe not. Biblical prophecies speak clearly about it, and Adventists have been some of the few to warn of what is to come. They are not just preaching a simple rest day, but a spiritual challenge on the world system that prepares to impose a global law that will change everything. In this video, you will discover the 10 reasons why they are trying to silence Adventists before Sunday's law. Get ready to understand what is behind this growing movement. What will be revealed here can change your perception forever. So stay with us to the end. What you will learn today can be more relevant than you think for the days to come. Before continuing, comments from which city and country you are watching. Enjoy and already leave the like and subscribe to the channel so as not to lose any powerful message that God has for your life. Let's continue. Reason 1. The world is ignoring the silent pressure. While most people follow their lives without realizing it, there is growing and silent pressure spreading around the world, especially directed against Seventh-day Adventists. The situation is becoming more serious as the voices of this church are strategically silenced. Churches are being watched, preaching are being monitored, and any deviation from established rules is rapidly labeled as a threat. What seems to be a quiet scenario is, in fact, the stage of an invisible struggle between freedom of religious expression and the attempt to control world narrative. For many, the question is simple. Why so much fear of a seemingly peaceful religious message? However, as Adventists continue to preach on Saturday, investigative judgment and separation between church and state, they become targets. The pressure against them is not only external, it is a silent struggle against doctrines that challenge the current religious and political system. And this pressure, however discreet, is accelerating in response to a message that deeply bothers those who seek to unify faith with civil power. As this dynamic intensifies, the true reason behind this pressure begins to become clear. A strategic attempt to silence the voice of those who call the world attention to the prophetic times in which we live. Reason 2. Why is the Adventist message bother? The reason the message of Adventists is so uncomfortable for the world is simple but deep. It directly confronts rooted religious traditions and the power systems that govern society. The central point of the Adventist message is the Sabbath, a day that, according to biblical interpretation, should be observed as a sign of loyalty to God. For most religions, Sunday is the sacred day, and this difference is the core of the conflict. When Adventists refuse to submit to Sunday's standard, They are publicly declaring that the world's religious authority is wrong and that true worship is given exclusively on the seventh day, as established in the Bible. This is not just a point of faith, it is an act of resistance to the world's system. But that's not all. Adventist doctrine is not limited to Saturday. The idea of investigative judgment, which teaches that we are living in a judgment phase in heaven, challenges the idea of guaranteed salvation without responsibility. This type of message moves the security structure that many people have in their beliefs, challenging them to reflect on their choices and actions. Thus, the Adventist message bothers because it requires a deep commitment to biblical truth, something that often challenges both society and established religious traditions. Reason 3. The Sabbath. Much more than a liturgical practice. Sabbath observance is not just a liturgical practice for Seventh-day Adventists. It is a fundamental pillar of your faith. Sabbath is seen as a seal of loyalty to God, a visible sign of commitment to the Creator and His commandments. In a world that promotes rest on Sunday, the firm position of Adventists to observe the seventh day becomes a direct challenge to the dominant system. But Saturday goes beyond a mere issue of religious ritual. For Adventists, he is a weekly reminder of creation and personal relationship with God, an opportunity for physical and spiritual restoration. It is a rejection of compliance with human standards and a statement that, as Christians, they must live according to biblical principles. The world, in turn, seems to be moving away from this vision, making Sunday a replacement of Saturday, alleging social, environmental, or even health motives. What is seen by many as a simple rest day becomes, for Adventists, a spiritual battle. Its resistance to Sunday as the sacred day is not a liturgical issue, but a prophetic issue. They believe that in recent days this observance will be a decisive test of loyalty to the Creator, and a clear sign of who will choose to follow God's principles or submit to the authority of human systems. Reason 4. The investigative judgment, a challenging doctrine. The doctrine of investigative judgment is one of the central pillars of Adventist faith and is one of the beliefs that causes the most discomfort to those who do not share this view. For Adventists, we are living in a period when heaven is in a process of investigating the actions and choices of each individual. Unlike automatic salvation, as many think, Adventist doctrine teaches that each life is revised, and each person's eternal destiny is being examined based on their decisions and commitment to divine principles. Not only does this challenge the conceptions of simple or easy salvation, but also puts a personal responsibility about each individual, a responsibility that many prefer to avoid. This doctrine undermines the idea that everything is guaranteed for believers and urges individuals to repent, convert, and live according to God's demands. The simple notion that our actions and life choices are seen by God and have eternal implications is, for many, an uncomfortable reminder of human fragility. The question, then, is not just the salvation itself, but the process by which it is achieved. The investigative nature of this judgment brings a deep reflection on the decisions we make, and this, of course, clashes with visions that seek salvation without the need for personal responsibility. Reason 5. The messages of the three angels, proclamation against false systems. The messages of the three angels, described in the book of Revelation 14, are essential for understanding the Adventist faith and the prophetic role of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. For Adventists, these messages are not only symbols or metaphors, but a prophetic call for all Christians in the world to move away from false religious systems and turn to the true worship of God. The first angel proclaims the eternal gospel, calling everyone to worship God, and the second announces the fall of Babylon, a symbol of false and corrupt religions that try to unify religion with civil power. For Adventists, this is not just a religious warning, but a clear call to move away from dangerous alliances between church and state. The third message draws attention to the need to resist the beast brand, a reference to the imposition of false worship on Sunday as a form of religious and political control. Each of these messages is a direct exhortation against systems that try to deceive and manipulate people about true worship and faithfulness to God. Therefore, the messages of the three angels not only foresee a future spiritual conflict, but they are also an incisive criticism of religious and political institutions that seek to divert people from true faith. For Adventists, compliance with these prophecies is an imminent reality that must be proclaimed urgently. Reason 6. Church and State, the defense of separation. The separation between church and state is a fundamental principle for Seventh-day Adventists, and this position becomes even more relevant as the modern world advances toward the mix of religious and political spheres. The Adventist Church firmly believes that religious freedom can only be preserved when the two spheres are separated. The history of the Church shows that whenever the Church joined the state, the result was religious persecution and the violation of individual freedoms. An example of this is persecution during Imperial Rome, the Inquisition, and the union of the Church and the state during the Middle Ages. These alliances resulted in authoritarian control of religion, leading to immense suffering to those who did not agree with the official view of the Church. Today, with the growing discussions about the legalization of religious practices, especially with regard to Sunday rest, the Adventist Church sees this as a sign that the world is moving towards a repetition of these historical errors. The defense of the separation between church and state is more than a political position for Adventists. It is a matter of preserving freedom of conscience and religious freedom. The possibility of seeing laws that force rest on Sunday is seen as a direct threat to this freedom, an attempt to reverse the advances achieved in the struggle for a religion separated from government power. Reason 7. The prophecy of the law of Sunday. Reality or theory? For decades, Adventists have preached on the imminent imposition of a law that will force rest on Sunday, a concept that many initially considered as a mere conspiracy theory. However, over the years, the scenario has been increasingly plausible. Global leaders of various spheres have begun to openly discuss the need for a weekly rest day, and Sunday has been presented as the preferred option. Arguments about public health, environmental issues, and social welfare are often cited to support this idea. For Adventists, this is a direct reflection of biblical prophecies, especially the revelation of Revelation 13, which speaks of the imposition of a global system that will require worship on the beast system, symbolizing false worship on Sunday. The role of the church in government, the union of religion and politics, are seen as the first steps for the implementation of this global law. The script points out that while many see such discussions as distant or unlikely, the connection with prophecy and current events makes the prophecy of the Domingion law increasingly relevant. What once seemed like a theological assumption becomes increasingly an urgent question, and Adventists feel called to alert the world to the imminent fulfillment of this crucial part of the great conflict. Reason 8. Religious freedom under threat. Religious freedom is a deeply rooted issue in the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine. From the beginning, Adventists have defended the idea that each person must have the freedom to worship God according to their own convictions, without coercion or imposition by governments or other institutions. This freedom is seen as a divine gift that must be preserved at all costs. However, as global events unfold, Adventists observe with concern the growing movement to restrict this freedom. The pressure to observe Sunday as a compulsory rest day is not only an attempt to establish a civil standard, but also a way to press religious consciences. When governments begin to legislate on religious practice, the risk of losing freedom of conscience becomes real. Adventists believe that true worship must be a personal choice, and any attempt to impose a day of worship is a fundamental violation of individual rights. This threat to religious freedom is not just a theoretical concern, it is seen as an imminent reality as global laws begin to be discussed in several nations. The defense of individual rights, especially with regard to religious worship, becomes one of the greatest concerns for those who see true faith as something that cannot be forced or manipulated. Reason 9. The struggle within the church. Change of focus. Within the Seventh-day Adventist Church itself, there is a silent struggle happening. In recent years, some subtle changes have occurred in the way the Adventist message is preached. Topics such as the investigative judgment, the prophetic identity of the church, and even the denunciation of Babylon, central elements of Adventist doctrine, are being progressively marginalized or diluted. Instead of a clear focus on biblical prophecy and the mission of proclaiming the truth, the message has become more generic, with emphasis on motivational and pleasant discourses. Although these adjustments may seem harmless at first glance, they represent an attempt to make the church more acceptable to the world, diluting the prophetic message that makes it unique. This tendency to soften the message is not just a social movement, but a weakening of the doctrinal bases that have given the Adventist Church their identity over the years. For Adventists faithful to the prophetic vision, this change of focus is worrying because it weakens the urgency of the mission. The danger is that by trying to make the message more palatable to the general public, the church loses the essence of what it should be, a guardian of the biblical truth and a preacher of the impending return of Christ. The internal adaptation movement, therefore, represents a serious threat to the church's mission to alert the world to events that are about to happen. Reason 10. The true objective. Silence the prophetic truth. The ultimate goal behind all the external and internal pressure against the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not simply to silence a religious organization, but to eradicate the prophetic truth it carries. This truth does not refer to a particular doctrine, but to the urgent call of warning to final times, when humanity will face the imposition of a world system that requires obedience to human authority to the detriment of faithfulness to God. The persecution against the Adventist Church, therefore, is not just a reaction to its organization, but an attempt to silence the message of judgment and loyalty to the Sabbath as a sign of faithfulness to the Creator. This message is considered uncomfortable because it directly challenges the secular and religious power that dominates the world. The true battle, according to Adventists, is not against the church as an institution, but against the truth it proclaims. This conflict is, in essence, spiritual, as it involves forces that seek to silence the voice that denounces error and proclaims fidelity to the Word of God. The intention is clear. If the voices that denounce falsehood and warn of the end of time are silenced, the world will be in spiritual darkness, unable to perceive the signs of the last days. Resistance to prophetic truth is not just a combat against a specific religion, but an attack on the very message of hope and warning that Adventists have urgently proclaimed. Now you are aware of something much bigger than it appeared to be, a silent spiritual battle that is happening before our eyes. What you just discovered is more than a simple theory or isolated concern. It's an urgent warning to what is coming. Each step that the world takes towards the imposition of a Sunday law is an attempt to stifle the biblical truth, to silence the voices they are calling for a spiritual awakening. But here is the fundamental truth you need to understand. No matter how much they try to silence the message, the truth will never be silenced. Now the big question is, what are you going to do with this information? What will you do with the reality that is approaching? Will you keep looking to the side, believing that this is something distant or insignificant? Or will you get up and position yourself, knowing that your faithfulness to the Creator is the only thing that really matters in recent days? This is not a matter of religion. It is a matter of faithfulness to God, to His Word, and what He has shown to us for this time. If you believe the Adventist message has something relevant to your life, don't be silent. Now it's time to share, to alert those who still don't know what's going on. The world is losing the sight of how the signs of the times are fulfilling themselves before our eyes, and you have the responsibility to be light in the middle of darkness. Like this video, share it with friends and family who need to understand the severity of this message. Subscribe to the channel so as not to lose the next videos, where we will continue to explore the prophecies, the signs, and the steps we should take to prepare for the events that are unfolding quickly. Together, we can spread the truth that saves and the message that should never be silent. The struggle for our freedom to worship, for our faithfulness to God, is not just a battle of the past. It is now, and she is yours too. Do not allow fear, indifference, or complacency to prevent you from living the truth of God in the days we are living. Stay firm, be faithful, and keep proclaiming the truth, no matter the cost. The end is closer than you think, and your decision can now define your eternal destiny. Until the next video, where we will continue to unravel the great conflict between good and evil, stay vigilant. Time is running out.